On a summer's evening in London, a crowd is gathering for an unusual cinematic experience. This is the Kennington Bioscope, a unique monthly event that takes place in the historic Old Lambeth Workhouse, where Charlie Chaplin lived and worked before he went on to become cinema's first international superstar. It is now the location of the Cinema Museum. The Bioscope gives its audience the chance to travel back to a time before multiplex cinemas, IMAX, 3D and ear-splitting surround sound, to experience long-forgotten silent films shown with live piano accompaniment, just as they would have been enjoyed 100 years ago. John Sweeney is a world-renowned silent film accompanist, co-founder of the event, and expert on the silent film era.
Well, the characteristic of silent film is that there is no real sound on the picture. You might have a soundtrack put on it at some point, either at the time or later, but there is no real sound. You don't have the sound of talking, you don't have the sound of dogs barking or doors closing or cars revving up or anything like that.
Of course, calling it silent film is a misnomer. Right from the beginning of cinema in 1895, people used music to fill the gaps left by not having real sound.
By the 20s, quite often productions would have a score which was written. If it was a particularly big budget sort of production number, they would have commissioned a score, which they would possibly expect to be played everywhere, but whether it was, I don't know. Other times the musical director of the production company would produce what's known as cue sheets, which is a list of popular tunes or tunes from big books of music for silent film. And they would say, play for this scene, play this number, for this scene, play another piece, and so on and so on. There are some people who think you should watch silent film in silence to get the pure cinematic experience, which is all very well, except the vast majority of silent films, in my opinion, don't work in silence. And certainly the vast majority of silent films were never made to be seen in silence. The directors didn't expect them to be seen in silence either. So there is a space for the music. The music is essential. And it's very interesting with someone like Alfred Hitchcock, whose 9 surviving silent films have recently been restored beautifully by the British Film Institute. If you look at his silent films, and then you look at the sound films, you can see that he grew up being a silent film director, because there are so many scenes in Hitchcock which aren't about dialogue at all, and where the music, there's action happening and the music is happening. Or in the case of, for example, the crop duster scene in North by Northwest, there isn't even any music. You have a real sound, but there's no dialogue. And you can see that he grew up making film by image. I mean, he said, show, don't tell. That was one of his catchphrases.
The release of the first official talking picture, The Jazz Singer, in 1927, signalled the beginning of the end of the silent film era. Hollywood only continued making silent films for another couple of years, but in other countries the tradition persisted.
In other countries, though, in Japan, for example, they were making silent films as late as 1935-36, and also in Russia. So it varies, but basically the end of the 20s was the end of the silent era. So when talkies came in, it took a while for all the cinemas to switch over to sound, but the writing was on the wall for silent film. I can't remember the figure, but I think at least 2/3 of the films made in the silent era were lost, either through neglect, because when sound came in, people thought nobody would be interested anymore. Silent films were also made on a film stock made out of silver nitrate, so they were often boiled up to get the silver content. And the film is fragile, so lots of films are just decayed. People always say that silent film music kind of goes, or, and of course sometimes it does, but I think people's image of silent film is so much derived from 2 things. One is from slapstick comedy, from the Buster Keaton and the Harold Lloyd and the Charlie Chaplin shorts, which they're familiar with, and the other thing is from German expressionism. Now, silent film was so much broader than this. When I got into silent film, I had the same sort of thought, that was basically silent film. But then I discovered this huge range of material.
Music can do a number of things for the audience. Sometimes it reflects the speed of the action, but more often it helps the audience to see inside the heads of the characters. It allows them to understand what a character is feeling. Music can shape our emotional response to the scene and character.
The most simple way of putting it is major is a major key is a happy key. That's is a happy key, and a minor is a sad key. But of course, that's simplifying to a ridiculous extent. You can have very, very sad music, which is in a major key. You can have very wistful music in a major key. So it's other factors like the rhythm, all that sort of thing, where the music is going, how it's building, how it's shaping, have a huge influence on the mood that you're creating. When I play for a film, my ideal of what I'm trying to achieve is summed up by a great composer of music for sound film, actually Elmer Bernstein, who said he tried to find the heartbeat of the film. Quite often I'm playing for a film I haven't seen, probably more than 50% of the time, I think. And that's hard. You spend the first part of the film, even if you know a little bit about it, of course you read up as much as you can to find out about it, but you spend the first bit of a film feeling for the characters and what's going on. Then if you're lucky, you can kind of lock in on what the director and the actors are trying to achieve in the film and what the characters are feeling, and then it somehow becomes easier and you get into the swing of the film and the rhythm of the film makes sense to you. Other times you feel like you can't quite get in there and you're sort of on the outside, and you can be doing the right sort of music, but you somehow haven't got the rhythm of the film and they're shaping it in terms of where it's building up to and so forth. In an ideal world, when I'm playing for a silent film, I shouldn't really be aware of what I'm playing at all. It's happened sometimes when I've got so swept up in the film that it's just the music is kind of poured out of me as a response to what I'm seeing on the screen. And I haven't had to think about it. I mean, one thing I say when I'm teaching a masterclass is something it's not always the case, but something that's worth thinking about when you're playing for a scene is what are people's heartbeats doing in this scene, you know? Are they, is it a scene where the tension is building up, you know? Or are they, you know? And so on. You know, there's a whole range of how you respond to what's happening on screen. But in a way, you have to kind of be inside the characters, I feel. That's my approach anyway. That's how I feel it works when I can get inside the characters.
Most people assume that the audiences at silent film screenings today will be filled with older people and film buffs. But increasingly, the audiences are filling with younger people with a newfound interest in the artistry of these early films.
And I feel like silent film has gone beyond that phase where something is old-fashioned to where it's become almost timeless, and people are recognising that it's a unique way of telling a story. It's also a unique picture into the past.